Commander Susan Miller's morning routine was interrupted by an urgent beep from her communication device. She was halfway through her coffee when the screen lit up with a priority alert. Susan sighed and put down her mug. As the head of communications for Outpost Delta 7, one of humanity's frontier colonies, she was used to emergencies. But nothing prepared her for what she saw next. "This can't be right," she whispered, scanning the report again. The Zenari Consortium, a founding member of the Galactic Peace Accord, had attacked 3 human colonies without warning. For 3,000 years, 17 spacefaring civilizations had lived without major conflict. Now that peace was broken, Susan rushed to the command center, her mind racing. Would they be next? Should they prepare evacuation plans? When she burst through the doors, she expected panic. Instead, she found the staff gathered around a large screen, pointing and laughing. "What's going on?" she asked, confused by their reaction. Lieutenant Greg Peters turned to her with a grin. "You have to see this, Commander. The Zenari attacked New Haven Colony last night." The screen showed footage from orbital cameras. Several Zenari ships approached the colony, fired weapons that mostly missed their targets, and then retreated after causing minimal damage to some empty fields and an abandoned storage facility. "No casualties?" Susan asked. "Not even a scratch," Greg replied. "Their targeting systems were way off. They hit a scarecrow in Joe Wilson's cornfield and declared it a strategic victory in their broadcast." Susan watched the footage again. The Zenari ships moved in clumsy formations, their weapons clearly not calibrated properly. It was like watching children play at war. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon's Space Warfare Division on Earth, Admiral Frank Collins received the same reports and footage. His staff prepared for an emergency response, but when Frank reviewed the attack patterns, he didn't call for battle stations. Instead, he laughed. "They've got to be kidding," he said, watching the Zenari ships fumble through their attack run. "This looks like they learned combat from watching old cartoons." His deputy, Captain Nancy Reed, studied the data more carefully. "Sir, it appears they aimed for uninhabited areas. Even their misses seem deliberate." Frank nodded. 3,000 years of peace means nobody remembers how to fight a real war anymore. Thank goodness for that. He stood up and straightened his uniform. "Send a message to all colonies. Continue normal operations, but document any damage for insurance claims." Insurance claims. Nancy looked confused. "Yes, we're not going to treat this as an act of war. We're going to treat it as property damage." Frank smiled. "Also, share the footage with the entertainment networks. People could use a good laugh." Back at Delta 7, Susan organized a community meeting to discuss the attacks. The colony's mess hall was packed with nervous residents. She showed them the footage, expecting fear. Instead, after a moment of silence, someone in the back began to chuckle. Soon, the whole room filled with laughter. Susan noticed Colony Director Ben Martinez wiping tears from his eyes. "I fought in the last border skirmish before the peace accord," the old man explained. "We were terrified of the Zenari back then. If this is the best they can do after 3,000 years, I think we'll be just fine." That night, children across the colony played a new game, pretending to be Zenari ships and dramatically missing their targets. Parents, who hours earlier had feared for their safety, now joined in the fun. When Susan sent her daily report to Earth, she included a special note: "Morale surprisingly high. The general feeling is that if this is what breaking the 3,000-year peace looks like, perhaps we have nothing to worry about after all." As she went to bed that night, Susan wondered if the Zenari understood what they had done. They hadn't inspired fear. They had given humanity its first good laugh at the galaxy's expense in 3 millennia. And somehow, that felt more dangerous than any real attack could have been. Diplomat Lisa Wright checked her appearance one last time in the mirror. Her formal blue uniform was spotless, her hair neatly pulled back. She took a deep breath. Today would be unlike any other day in her 15-year diplomatic career. The Grand Council chamber on Alpha Centauri was the most impressive room in the galaxy. 17 tall chairs formed a circle, one for each spacefaring civilization. For 3,000 years, disputes were settled here with words, not weapons. Until now. As Lisa entered the chamber, the usual quiet chatter stopped. All eyes, some with 2 pupils, others with none at all, turned to watch the human representative. Lisa smiled politely and took her seat. Council leader Krill Sepp, a Volteri with shimmering green skin, spoke first. This emergency session will address the recent incidents. The Zenari Consortium has actions to explain. Threx Ol, the Zenari ambassador, rose from his seat. His 6 limbs moved in the formal pattern of serious discourse. Esteemed council members, humans have grown too powerful too quickly. Our military action was a necessary warning. They expand too fast and challenge ancient balances of power. Lisa watched him carefully. The tall, blue-skinned alien seemed nervous, his middle arms twitching slightly as he spoke. We demand humans reduce their colonial expansion by 30% and share their new faster-than-light technology with all council races. Threx Ol continued, or we will be forced to take stronger action. The chamber filled with concerned murmurs. No one had made demands backed by military threats since before the peace accord. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she did something unexpected. She smiled. First, I want to thank the Zenari for their interesting display, she said calmly. Our military experts were quite entertained by your attack patterns. Some suggested we include them in our training programs as examples of what not to do. The chamber went silent. No diplomat had ever used humor during a crisis. As for your demands, Lisa continued, we're happy to discuss technology sharing through the usual channels. But perhaps we should offer combat training as part of our next cultural exchange. Several council members gasped. Others tried to hide their amusement. This is not a joke. Threx Ol shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber. We have broken the peace. You should be afraid. Lisa's smile faded, but her voice remained calm. Ambassador, if you wanted to frighten humans, you should have studied our history more carefully. We've survived worse, much worse, from others and from ourselves. Your attack was so poorly executed that children on our colonies are now playing games mimicking it. Back on Earth, President Alan Garcia sat in the Oval Office, watching the council session live. Next to him, Defense Secretary Harold Peters looked worried. Sir, should we prepare a military response? The Zenari could attack again. The president shook his head. No, our response needs to match the threat level. Which is? Harold asked. Low, almost comical. President Garcia picked up his tablet and made a decision that would confuse the galaxy. Approve this instead. Harold read the order and blinked in surprise. Sir, you want to broadcast human comedy shows about the attack, with tactical improvement notes. Exactly. The president nodded. The Zenari wanted to make a statement. Let's make one back, that we're so unconcerned, we find their aggression entertaining. That evening, across all galactic channels, humans shared videos of comedians making jokes about the Zenari attack. Each video ended with a smiling human military officer offering helpful tips on how the Zenari could improve their targeting systems and battle formations for next time. On the Zenari homeworld, their leaders watched in growing confusion and anger. This was not how victims of aggression were supposed to act. Where was the fear? The desperate diplomacy? The military mobilization? They'd mock us, War Minister Zoltek growled. Strategic advisor Mira Sen looked troubled. No, they're doing something worse. They're showing the galaxy they don't consider us a serious threat. And throughout the galaxy, other species began to wonder, what kind of civilization responds to the first act of war in 3 millennia with laughter? Dr. Olivia Powell never expected to become a celebrity. As a xenopsychologist at the Galactic Relations Institute in New Chicago, she usually spent her days quietly studying how different species think. Now, 1 week after the Zenari attack, her office was packed with alien visitors. "Please, one question at a time," she said, raising her hands as the crowd of diplomats, reporters, and researchers all tried to speak at once. A tall Voltaire journalist spoke first. "Why do humans laugh at danger? Is this a mental problem?" Olivia smiled. "Not a problem, a strength. Throughout human history, we've used humor as a tool to face fears. It's how we cope with stress." A small green Relani diplomat raised 3 hands. "But the Zenari attack your worlds. They broke the peace accord. How can this be funny?" "The key is understanding threat assessment," Olivia explained. "Humans don't fear what we don't respect. The Zenari attack was so poorly executed that it didn't register as a serious threat. We laugh hardest at things we don't fear." As the aliens took notes, Olivia pulled up images on her screen. They showed children on frontier colonies playing games based on the attack. In one picture, kids threw water balloons at cardboard cutouts of Zenari ships. "This is how we process events," she continued. "We turn fear into play. It's an ancient human technique." Meanwhile, on the frontier colony of Harmony, the locals were taking this approach to the extreme. Governor Paul Martinez watched as townspeople set up for the first annual mock invasion festival. "Is this appropriate?" asked his assistant, Darla Brown. "Some people might think we're not taking the attack seriously." Paul looked around at the busy scene. Children painted their faces blue like Zenari. Food stalls sold alien attack tacos and peace accord punch. A band practiced songs with titles like "Missed Me by a Mile" and "The Worst War Ever." "We are taking it seriously, in our own way," Paul replied. "Look around. Everyone's together, laughing, bonding." The Zenari wanted to create fear. Instead, they gave us a reason to celebrate our community. Across the field, a group of actual Zenari tourists watched in confusion. They had arrived on a pre-scheduled cultural exchange that nobody had thought to cancel. Now they stood awkwardly, unsure how to react as humans playfully mocked their species' military failure. One brave Zenari approached Paul. "This is not what we expected," the alien said carefully. Paul handed the visitor a blue frozen treat. "It's called a snow cone. Try it. It's the same color as your skin." Back on Earth, Captain Eric Ross faced a strange problem. As head of military recruitment for the North American region, he expected application numbers to rise after the attack. Instead, they dropped by 15%. "I don't understand," he told his team during their weekly meeting. Throughout history, military recruitment always increases after an attack. Lieutenant Judy Kim pulled up the latest survey results. People don't see the Zenari as a real threat. When asked why they chose not to enlist, 60% said something like, "If that's what aliens call an attack, we don't need more soldiers." Eric sighed. "It's hard to inspire defensive patriotism when the enemy becomes a joke." "Should we change our recruitment ads?" Judy asked. "No," Eric decided after thinking for a moment. "If the public isn't worried, we shouldn't pretend there's a crisis. That would damage trust. Instead, let's focus on other benefits of military service: education, adventure, being part of something bigger than yourself." As the meeting ended, Eric checked his messages. His nephew had sent a video of a school play where children acted out the Zenari attack. The kids playing the aliens dramatically missed their targets while the audience laughed. Eric smiled. In 3,000 years of peace, humanity had changed. They no longer responded to aggression with fear and anger. Instead, they used humor as a shield. And somehow, that made them stronger than any weapons could. What the Zenari failed to understand was simple: you can't intimidate a species that laughs at your attempts to frighten them. Admiral Mary Johnson stood on the bridge of the U.S. Liberty, looking at the stars through the main viewport. Her small fleet of 5 ships was about to enter Zenari space. This was not a revenge mission. It was something far more unusual. "Are you sure about this, Admiral?" Captain Steve Harris asked quietly. The Zenari might see our approach as aggressive. Mary smiled. That's why we're broadcasting our intentions on all frequencies. This isn't a surprise visit. The Liberty led 4 other ships toward the Zenari border. None had their weapons powered up. Instead, they carried something the Zenari would never expect. An invitation. Message prepared, Admiral. Communications Officer Pete Wilson announced. Send it, Mary ordered. The message was simple but shocking. To the Zenari Fleet Command, we invite you to join us for joint military exercises. If you're going to break a 3,000-year peace, at least learn to do it properly. Across the galaxy, news of the human response spread quickly. Many species were confused. Some were amused. Others watched with growing interest, especially the Veldari Imperium. The Veldari were an ancient species, proud warriors who had reluctantly joined the peace accord. Now, they sent observers to human worlds to study this unexpected reaction to aggression. Veldari anthropologist Kez Turo walked through a busy market on Earth, recording everything he saw. 3 weeks after the attack, humans showed no signs of fear. Instead, toy stores sold stuffed Zenari dolls that made silly sounds when squeezed. Street vendors sold T-shirts with jokes about the failed attack. They mock what should terrify them. Kez Turo wrote in his report to the Veldari High Command, "Perhaps we have misunderstood humans all along." His assistant, Velner, pointed to a group of children playing in the park. "Look at their game," she said. The children took turns pretending to be Zenari attackers, dramatically missing targets and then falling down while the others laughed. In 3,000 years, we never once considered attacking humans because we feared their response, Kez Turo noted. The Zenari attacked and got laughter. Which is worse, being feared or being mocked? On the colony world of Esperanza, farmer Kevin Anderson walked through his damaged fields. The Zenari attack had destroyed about an acre of his corn crop. It wasn't much, but he needed to file an insurance claim. Kevin sat at his kitchen table, filling out the form on his tablet. When he reached the section asking for cause of damage, he paused. Then, with a smile, he typed, "Comically inept alien invasion." He didn't expect what happened next. Within hours, his insurance form went viral across the galactic net. Trillions of non-human eyes viewed his simple joke. Most couldn't understand why it was funny, but they all recognized something important. Humans found humor in events that would cause most species to panic. Meanwhile, the Galactic Insurance Consortium held an emergency meeting to create a new damage category. After 3,000 years of peace, they had no policies covering acts of war. "We'll call it Unexpected Interspecies Conflict Event," suggested the chairperson. A human representative shook her head. "Just call it what it is, Zenari target practice. They'll need the practice for next time." As Kevin's insurance form continued to spread across the galaxy, it reached the desk of Zenari Supreme Commander Vexen. He studied it carefully, trying to understand the human reaction. "They find us amusing," he told his officers. "This is unexpected." His tactical advisor looked worried. "Our intelligence reports show no military buildup, no fleet movements toward our space, no diplomatic isolation efforts. It's as if they don't consider us a threat at all." Vexen stared at the image of Kevin's form, particularly the words "comically inept." "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have made a miscalculation." At that moment, their sensors detected 5 human ships approaching their border, broadcasting an invitation that no one in the room knew how to answer. Supreme Commander Vexen of the Zenari fleet paced in his private chamber. The large circular room, with its traditional blue lighting, usually calmed him. Today, nothing could ease his growing worry. "Enter," he called when he heard the door chime. War Minister Zoltek and Strategic Advisor Mirasen walked in, both looking tense. For a moment, no one spoke. 3 of the most powerful Zenari in the galaxy, and none wanted to say what they were all thinking. "The humans have made fools of us," Zoltek finally said, his voice sharp with anger. Their ships wade our border, not with weapons, but with mockery. Mira-sen, smaller and older than her colleagues, shook her head. It's worse than that. They've turned our attack into entertainment. The entire galaxy now laughs at us. Vexen stopped pacing. Our plan was simple. Show strength. Make humans respect our power. Force them to slow their expansion. He gestured to the data screen showing reports from across the galaxy. Instead, they sell toys of our ships that crash when children play with them. We must strike again, Zoltek insisted, slamming 4 of his 6 hands on the table. With real force this time. No more warning shots or empty fields. We must target their cities, their shipyards. Mira-sen's eyes widened. That would start a true war, the first in 3,000 years. Better war than humiliation, Zoltek growled. Vexen turned to the window, looking out at the stars. Before we decide, we must understand what went wrong. Mira-sen, what do your analysts say about the human response? The strategic advisor pulled up her notes. The humans are not following any known conflict pattern. They've turned our aggression into entertainment. Their children play games mimicking our attack. They've invited us to training exercises, as if we need their help. She paused, then added, most concerning of all, they're treating our attack as if it were a minor annoyance, not an act of war. Like a child's tantrum rather than a threat. So what do you suggest? Vexen asked quietly. The humans are not responding as we predicted. A stronger attack might only amuse them more, while giving them justification for a response we cannot predict. Zoltek snorted. You fear humans. Their ships are fewer than ours. I fear what we don't understand, Mira-sen replied. And I do not understand why a species would laugh at an attack that broke 3,000 years of peace. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Jack Howard sat in a small conference room with just 5 other people. While the public saw only jokes and laughter, this team had a more serious job. The Zenari have 2 options, Jack explained, pointing to the display. They can either escalate and face an actual human military response, or they can try a safe face. Which do you think they'll choose, sir? Asked Major Amy Davis. Jack closed the file labeled Proportional Response Options and opened one titled Comedy Relief Scenarios. My money's on saving face. The Zenari value pride above all else. Right now, they're a galactic joke. They need a way out that lets them keep some dignity. Amy looked skeptical. So our strategy is to keep making fun of them. Partly, Jack nodded. But we also need to offer them a path back to respectability. That's where you come in. He handed her a data pad with a plan that had been approved by the highest levels of Earth's government. As she read it, her eyes widened. Sir, this is unexpected. The best strategies usually are. Jack smiled. The Zenari expect us to either cower in fear or counterattack. We've done neither. Now let's offer them something else they won't expect. A way to end this without losing more face. Back in Zenari space, Vexen made his decision. Send word to our diplomatic corps. We need options that preserve our honor without escalating to full war. As he spoke, the sensors chimed again. A small human ship had broken from the fleet and was approaching closer, still broadcasting a message. But this time, it wasn't an invitation to joint exercises. It was something else entirely, something no Zenari could have predicted. The galaxy watched and waited. News networks from all 17 spacefaring civilizations focused their attention on the small human ship approaching Zenari space. No one knew what would happen next. On Earth, Secretary of Interstellar Relations Diane Cooper prepared to address the public. The Oval Office was set up for a direct broadcast to both Earth citizens and all galactic channels. This would be the first official human government statement since the Zenari attacks 4 weeks ago. We'll live in 30 seconds, Madam Secretary, the media director said. Diane nodded and straightened her simple blue suit. She had practiced this speech many times, knowing that her words would either calm the growing tension or inflame it further. The red light on the camera turned on, and billions of beings across thousands of worlds watched as she began to speak. "Citizens of Earth and friends throughout the galaxy," she said with a warm smile. "Today I address a matter that has caused much discussion: the recent military actions taken by the Zenari Consortium against human colonies." She paused briefly. Everyone expected demands for reparations, security guarantees, or other punitive measures. What they heard instead shocked the galaxy. The human government is willing to officially classify these incidents as joint military exercises conducted without prior notification rather than acts of war. Gasps could be heard in newsrooms across the galaxy. On the Zenari homeworld, Supreme Commander Vex nearly fell from his chair. "This one-time reclassification," Diane continued, "would ensure the peace accord remains technically unbroken after 3,000 years. We value peace too much to let misunderstandings threaten it." In the Zenari Command Center, Mira Sen stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're offering us a way out," she whispered. "Not revenge, not demands. A path to preserve the peace accord." War Minister Zoltek looked confused. "Is this some human trick? Why would they do this when they could demand concessions?" Vexen studied the human woman's face carefully. "Perhaps they understand something we forgot, that peace is harder to rebuild than to maintain." On the colony world of New Horizon, construction crews began rebuilding the minor damage caused by the Zenari weapons. Lead engineer William Baker reviewed the plans with his team. "These new buildings will include these curved roof elements," he explained, pointing to the blueprint. "It's based on traditional Zenari architecture." His assistant looked confused. "Why use Zenari designs?" "They attacked us." William smiled. "Call it a subtle reminder. Every time Zenari visitors see these buildings, they'll remember what happened and how we responded." Throughout human space, similar projects began. Damaged areas weren't just repaired. They were rebuilt with small elements of Zenari design. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to be noticed by any Zenari who visited. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council, representatives debated the human proposal. Many were impressed by the gesture, though some remained suspicious. "Why would humans forgive so easily?" asked the Triteri ambassador. "What do they gain?" Laser Wright, the human diplomat, stood to answer. "We gain nothing tangible, but we preserve something valuable: the longest peace in galactic history." She looked around at the assembled representatives. "My ancestors knew war, real war, not the brief exchange we experienced recently. They taught us that victory isn't always about defeating an enemy. Sometimes, it's about finding a way forward together." The Zenari ambassador, Threxul, had remained silent throughout the session. Now he slowly rose from his seat. The chamber went quiet, everyone waiting for his response. "The Zenari Consortium," he began, then paused as if choosing his words carefully. "The Zenari Consortium is willing to discuss this reclassification." A sigh of relief passed through the chamber. The path to preserving the peace accord was now open. Back on the human ship approaching Zenari space, Admiral Mary Johnson received the news with a smile. "Change course," she ordered. "We're no longer delivering an invitation to military exercises." "What's our new mission, Admiral?" her captain asked. "Something far more important," Mary replied. "We're delivering an invitation to a peace summit." 3 months after the attacks, Earth hosted the Millennial Games, a grand Olympic-style competition held every 1,000 years among all spacefaring species. In the spirit of continuing peace, the Games had not been canceled despite recent tensions. The Grand Stadium in New Beijing was packed with creatures from across the galaxy. Colorful flags from 17 civilizations fluttered in the gentle breeze. The biggest question on everyone's mind: would the Zenari attend? That question was answered when the Zenari athletes marched into the stadium during the opening ceremony. The crowd went quiet for a moment, then erupted in applause. Not mocking applause, but genuine welcome. What happened next surprised everyone. The opening ceremony featured a comedy skit about the attack, with both human and Zenari performers participating. They acted out the failed attack in an exaggerated way, with Zenari ships spinning in circles and missing targets by miles, while human colonists continued everyday activities, barely noticing. The audience laughed, including the Zenari spectators. By laughing at themselves, the Zenari had found a way to regain respect. Commander Susan Miller, now assigned as military liaison to the Zenari delegation, watched from the sidelines. Next to her stood Zexlor, her Zenari counterpart. "I don't understand," Zexlor said quietly. "3 months ago, we attacked your worlds. Today, we laugh together about it. How is this possible?" Susan smiled. "Humans have a saying, tragedy plus time equals comedy. But there's more to it than that." She looked across the field where human and Zenari athletes now prepared to compete together. "Humans never feared your attack because we've survived much worse, from others and from ourselves. We've learned that sometimes laughter is the best weapon against fear and hate." Zexlor considered this. "My people value strength and respect. We thought you didn't respect us. That's why we attacked. And now I think we didn't understand what true strength is." In the days that followed, human and Zenari athletes competed fiercely but fairly. They shared meals, stories, and most importantly, laughter. Pictures of human and Zenari competitors arm in arm spread across galactic media. At the Galactic Council, diplomats worked to formalize what was already happening naturally. The peace accord was amended to include a new principle proposed jointly by humans and Zenari. A civilization's strength lies not in its capacity for violence, but in its ability to respond to aggression with proportionality, and when possible, humor. Other species studied this principle with fascination. The Veldari, ancient warriors, found it particularly interesting. The humans did not need weapons to win this conflict. One Veldari general noted, "They used something more powerful. They refused to be enemies." On the final day of the Millennial Games, President Alan Garcia and Zenari High Leader Sanvos signed the amended accord together. President Garcia's closing words would be studied in diplomatic academies across the galaxy for generations. "Peace isn't maintained by fear of war. It's preserved by remembering that beneath our differences, there exists the capacity to laugh together, even at our own mistakes." As the ceremonies ended, Susan and Zexlor walked through the park surrounding the stadium. They passed a group of children, some human, some Zenari, and several from other species, all playing together. "What game are they playing?" Zexlor asked. Susan watched as the children pretended to be ships from different civilizations, working together to explore an imaginary new planet. "They're playing Galactic Explorers," she answered. "Not war games anymore. I think they've learned something important from all this." On frontier bases across human space, the unofficial motto that had appeared during the crisis remained, though with a new ending: 3 millennia of peace, shattered by an attack so ineffective. All we could do was laugh. And in that laughter, we found a stronger peace than before. The galaxy had watched in confusion as humans responded to aggression with humor. Now they understood. Sometimes the strongest response to force isn't more force, but the courage to find something to laugh about, even in the darkest moments.